thank you. That's really a good chance and big pleasure to me to speak for the first time here in Chicago, and especially in this audience. Here, that's a good occasion as we have this summit. For me personally, this is the next side event at the summit which I attend after Bucharest summit. And today we already mentioned the historical legacy of Bucharest summit for Ukraine and Georgia. At that time, the perspective of joining NATO was declared by the NATO and its member states. And the value of this declaration still very important. However, the value of legacy of Bucharest summit is not just limited to this short declaration, but it has wider implication. And here I'd like to concentrate my speech on this wider vision over Bucharest summit legacy and beyond, for sure. First of all, I'm a representative of the civil society of Ukraine. That means that regardless of who is in power, who is president, who is in the government, we pursue the same goals and objectives, and we are quite consistent pursuing the goal of European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. And we are just one of the many NGOs in Ukraine who deal professionally with specific areas of some way connected to Euro-Atlantic integration, including bilateral Ukrainian NATO agenda and wider in terms of security sector reforms, international relations, and general set of principles which are the basis, which constitute the basis of transatlantic community, where we see Ukraine as an integral part. For sure, I would not like just to come back to analyze what does mean today's Ukrainian approach, as we consider we are obviously skeptical about the relevance of this approach, and definitely have some specific views on the reason why this government pursues this so-called non-bloc policy. But it is not a matter of my presentation. For sure, we have this situation today, and we have to develop certain channels of certain options of developments in order to respond to the challenges which the government in Kyiv provides for us. For sure, there is combination of factors which do not allow us to see the picture in just very simplistic black and white model. There are no just friends and enemies. There is very complicated situation in our part of the world and our part of Europe. That is why we have to take into account all the possible factors which affect situation, affect decision-making process, and affect developments of the institutions which are highly important for any ambitions of Euro-Atlantic integration. So here, coming back to the Bucharest legacy, I would like to refer to the fact which was not mentioned today yet, that after Bucharest summit, Ukraine obtained a specific instrument from NATO entitled Annual National Programs, which is an instrument which was previously designed only for the countries of membership action plan, only for candidate countries. And that was an enormous change of the approach of alliance, which provided this kind of instrument to the country which does not have a map. I just want to mention that several weeks ago, in late April, President signed the decree adopting the annual national program for this year, for 2012. And if you look at this document, it consists very comprehensive, very well structured, and very ambitious set of obligations and reform, which, if they taken seriously, may really help Ukraine to become eligible candidate for NATO membership quite soon. But for sure we can say that the same set of reforms were also prescribed by previous ANP and previous before previous, etc. So something is not perfect in this scheme. However, being a representative of civil society dealing with particularly this instrument, I may say that annual national programs really proved to be certain value, the instrument which helps to consolidate both governmental and civil society reforms in order to concentrate over certain specific areas of transformation, to get it into more or less clear framework, clear structure, and provide specific monitoring, planning, watchdogging, and other civil society activity which can be helpful if there is a civil society really willing to push for Euro-Atlantic reforms. And this instrument has helped us to build certain coalitions of civil society actors along the specific lines of reforms, from the administrative reforms to specific security and defense sector reforms. Finally, we have this process more or less transparent, available for civic oversight. And that's really helpful because it provides certain mechanisms for the society to be aware about the substance, what really Euro-Atlantic integration is about. And in the frames of this coalition, these groups working with annual national programs, we may see that there is certain growing awareness about the responsibilities which country takes if it really wishes to be a part of Euro-Atlantic community. And it's really important because sometime, and this is our problem of our society, NATO membership is considered from the position of consumerism. So NATO is needed for us to defend us. But we are good friends of NATO. We don't want Ukraine to weaken or to disrupt NATO. We want Ukraine in NATO to strengthen NATO. And in order to do this, we need to do a lot of things in Ukraine before we will be credible candidates for NATO membership. That is why maybe this view looks a little bit skeptical or even opportunistic, but I may say that I am not in favor of joining Ukraine NATO as soon as possible. But this is a view of certain professional community. We want to have a NATO accession process as much helpful as possible to develop all the necessary institutional reforms, capacity building reforms, interoperability reforms to make Ukraine really integral part of all the mechanisms designed for the sake of the entire Euro-Atlantic community. For sure, it is not the only way of doing things. In Ukraine, there is NATO today, just to inform you, is not so hot topic like it was like 3 years ago. At that time, when today's governmental team, at that time opposition, they were strongly arguing against NATO membership, and the entire agenda about NATO was rather scandalous. Today it is, like somebody said today, that Ukraine is not on the agenda in NATO, as much as NATO is not much on the agenda in Ukraine. And it's pity. It's a pity. On the other hand, there is a chance to do some work in a way which does not provoke lots of scandals like like the situation we got 3 or 5 years ago. Here, the question, there were certain questions about society, about its capacity to consolidate support. For sure, if discussing the possible referendum on NATO, it's not the time when we can ensure the positive outcome. For sure, any discussion about referendum is discussion about nothing in present conditions. But what is really important is to consolidate at least visible segment of society and political spectrum. And here I am welcoming Valentin Nalivaychenko mentioning today that we do not have enough strong statements from the opposition or from the entire opposition on the NATO membership. But at least there should be certain political parties in the opposition who openly argue that they are in favor of NATO membership. And even if the NATO membership is supported by just 20% of population, 20% is a huge piece of electorate, it's a huge piece of voters. And some of these voters are looking for a party which openly declares its objective to see Ukraine in NATO. It will be a value if during the next election we will have such a party which clearly indicates this objective. So, for sure, civil society in Ukraine is not homogeneous one. And if you ask me, do you represent the position of the entire civil society? Probably not. But I would say that it's very important to see that we have, during last maybe decade or even more, we have growing awareness of the certain segment of civil society, growing involvement into transatlantic connections on different levels, including research activity, policy advocacy, youth exchanges, some trainings, education programs. And these NATO-related activities, not necessary to NATO itself and as organization, it may be connected to some member states' priorities. But all this activity already produced a certain critical mass of the citizens really capable to, first of all, to understand to be deeply aware about the substance of what NATO is, what Euro-Atlantic integration is, what Euro-Atlantic community is. And this part of society is capable to deliver some messages, some knowledges, to argue it vis-à-vis the media, vis-à-vis other parts of the society, vis-à-vis students, teachers, etc. And be an integral part of the international society, taking part in international events, contributed to the debates on security issues led by NATO. And it is very important. So here, civil society of Ukraine is rather ahead of Ukrainian government, which is sometimes not ready to be a part of these debates or trying to avoid some specific or sensitive issues. So here there is some resources which may play, we hope, play an important role in the future. So just summarizing, for sure I would not like to be naive to say something that, okay, we will change the government and then we will join NATO very soon. No, you all are aware that Ukraine is a very complicated animal. So it will be quite long way to the world we used to name the Western world. However, there is no other option for Ukraine to survive. And NATO here is just one of the elements, one of the pillars or the milestones which provide some certain guidelines. It is not a panacea, but it is a very important component of this general picture of the world, which is a pattern which is a positive pattern for Ukraine to be in terms of values, in terms of certain standards, and in terms of future. So here, I think that regardless of, again, who is in power, maybe this period of time for Ukraine will be also helpful, I hope so, in order to understand mistakes, in order to understand what was wrong in the past, in order to see a realistic and productive way to future. Thank you.